Seeing as how we've been doing this ongoing story thing, and not everybody's here every week to know every part of this ongoing story, I really feel like I need to start by saying, previously on Gas Station Christmas, I will give you the recap. I shared with you over the last 2 weeks about some of my observances and reflections while working at United Dairy Farmers. It was my first job right out of college. Well, in college, rather. And I talked about products we served. I talked about the kind of work that it was, the type of people that came in to buy things. And in the middle of both of 2 weeks, I slowly introduced the story of one particular family, a husband and wife named Jeff and Amy, who came to the store one particular Christmas Eve night. And very frustratingly for some of you, I have not revealed a lot of details about the story over the last 2 weeks. I've given you one or two little snippets, like that they were outside the car for several hours and they only sent their son in every few minutes asking for little plastic spoons. And then when they finally did come in, they were exhausted, they were starving, and they asked one of the workers that was there if they could have the expired, dried up roller grill hot dog that was going to be thrown away, and the 2 old donuts that were sitting on the shelf that were going to also be thrown away. I haven't told you why they were hungry. I also haven't told you why they can't pay for their food. I haven't told you why they needed so many spoons or why they've been at the gas station for so long. And as frustrating as it is, I'm not going to tell you all those things right now either. I know it's painful. I know. It's very painful to wait so long to get information, but the delivery of this story accentuates the delivery of another story that has also been shared over those 2 weeks, and it's a story that you're a lot more familiar with. It's the story of the birth of Jesus. And maybe you haven't noticed this, but over those past 2 weeks of discussing the Christmas story, I haven't given you the full delivery of that story either. I've mentioned the scriptures from Isaiah, scriptures from Micah that prophesy his arrival. I've read the scriptures from Luke about the shepherds that received the message from the angels and about the announcement that came to them about his birth while they were out watching for trouble in the fields with the sheep on the night shift. They were told that they would find the baby born already and that they would, when they get there, they would understand the significance of the baby being born and being seen in a manger wrapped in a bunch of strips of little cloth, because they likely were priestly shepherds who were guarding over lambs that were going to be used for sacrifice. So they would understand the visual meaning of the fact that there was a lamb wrapped in cloths lying in a manger, because they know that to be true for sacrificial lambs. But they didn't witness the delivery of the baby. The baby was already born when they got there. The week before, we read scriptures from Matthew where Joseph is told by an angel not to fear and not to worry about taking Mary as his wife, that Joseph was told he was going to witness the birth of the Messiah. And we read from the narrative from Luke where Mary and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem to register for the census, Luke 2:1. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. You all remember that, right? You know the story. We heard it. We read it. But we didn't read the next 2 verses. The next 2 verses are the verses that say the time came when the baby was born. We read about them getting to Bethlehem, and then we skip down to where the shepherds were told by the angels that the baby was going to be born and where they could go to see him lying in a manger. But we didn't read the verse that says physically Mary gave birth to Jesus. Did you notice that we didn't do that? Did anybody catch it? Or were you too worried about these little spoons and what those spoons had to do with anything? But you know it's there. Everyone knows it's there. You know the verse is there. You hear it every year. The time came for Mary to give birth, and she gave birth, and she wrapped him in cloths and lined him in a manger. It's all right there. You may have believed that you already heard it because the story is so familiar, but I deliberately didn't read that verse. We even read the poetic passage from John that describes the baby being born without saying any of those words, by saying the word became flesh. But I didn't read the verse from Luke where Mary physically delivers Jesus. Somehow, though, I don't think that frustrates you near as much as Jeff and Amy. Because you know that the story of the birth of Jesus, you know where it goes and how it happens. You have no idea about the story of Jeff and Amy. or where it goes, or how it happens. And now that Jeff and Amy have made their way into the store and they're sitting inside the UDF, there's more eager anticipation for you to get to know more of the story as they share it with the employees that are in the store, the ones that were on night shift duty that night. But just like the Christmas story, Jeff and Amy's story is all about timing and placement. It's timing and placement. Luke 2:8, and there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. Nighttime. Night shift. Micah 4:8, as for you, watchtower of the flock, stronghold of the daughter of Zion, the former dominion will restore to you. The kingship will come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Timing and placement. The shepherds were likely in the fields of Migdal Eder, which we talked about last week, which is both the Hebrew words for a place that is elevated so that shepherds can look out and see danger that's coming and sheep that might be in trouble, particularly sacrificial lamb sheep that need to be protected completely from harm. But Migdal Eder is also the name of a specific location that's just outside of Jerusalem so that during temple worship times, it was easy to get to those lambs that could be sacrificed. And those night watch shepherds were the lowest status because they were the night watch. They didn't get the great day shift job. They were the nighttime ones who did whatever they were told to do. They were lowly shepherds, like a teenage kid working 4 to midnight at a gas station. It's timing and placement. Timing and placement. Matthew 1:18. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. Oh, it's going to tell us. Okay, great. His mother Mary is pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant with the Holy Spirit through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. And then on Luke 2:4. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee in Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. Timing and placement. If Joseph had divorced Mary in Nazareth, Mary likely would have been disgraced, shunned, and possibly even stoned to death through Mosaic law. Joseph would have still gone to Bethlehem because the birth or the death or the life of Mary or Jesus had nothing to do with the decree being made for the census to be taken. Joseph would have still gone to Bethlehem. But because of the timing of Mary's pregnancy in conjunction with that decree of the census, and Joseph being told that the baby was to be the Messiah, everything could fall into place, you see. It all just comes together so that Jesus could fulfill the prophecies of him to being born in Bethlehem. The right timing existed for everything to work out together. We've summarized that already this year in 2 Greek words. The first one being the theme word for this year, and the other one being the theme word from last year here at Livestream. Those 2 words are kairos and synergeo. Synergeo, as we know, is all things working together. We remember this from last month. We mentioned it a few times during this series. It's come up a little bit. Kairos, if you recall, we got to go a little farther back for kairos. Kairos is a reference to time, not like measured time, like minutes and seconds and hours, or 3 hours and 15 minutes. That's chronos time. Kairos time is more like an opportunity. Kairos is like just at the right time. It's like a piston. Inside your car engine, assuming you have a gas engine car, there are pistons. The pistons are little factories under the hood. They're taking in fuel, they're compressing it, they're combusting it, and they're expelling out gas. That's all it does, over and over and over again. The piston just takes in fuel, compresses it, spits out the gas. And there are 4 different positions or strokes that take place during the function of the piston. Fuel intake is the first one. And after the fuel intake, the piston goes down, it sucks in the gas. And then there's compression when it circles back around to come back up. It compresses up toward the spark plug. And when it hits the spark, it ignites, causing the boom. And that power, that explosion, makes the piston come back down again and form the power process that makes the car actually move forward. And then finally, again, on the return, it spits out all of that exhaust. Everything that was burned up from the fuel of the piston goes back out the exhaust. 4 steps all the way through. And all the pistons are connected together to a crankshaft, which is in an offset position so that they can all work in conjunction with together, all things working together, opposing each other so that the right timing and the right nature happens so that your car can keep moving and moving in a perfect rhythm. And to make sure that it keeps going as efficiently and with as much synchronicity as it can, there is a camshaft position sensor. Yes, there is a camshaft position sensor for any car made in like the last 20 years, or probably more. I don't even know how long we've been with these computers and crazy stuff. There are sensors for everything, but there is very specifically a sensor that is saying for the crankshaft to be in a certain spot. And if it's not, it sends a message to the computer and says, our timing's not quite right here. Something's off. I'm not sure what's happening. And if something goes wrong with that, your timing and placement are off. You don't have Kairos for your center Geo. I don't really know anything about cars, just so you know. I'm trying to learn. It makes it difficult when you start learning about gas engines and then you go to school buses and then realize that school buses don't have spark plugs because diesel doesn't explode. It's totally different, but that concept still works and you understand that gas blows up. Everybody know that? Everybody knows that gas blows up. Good. A lot of mechanics would come into UDF and they would explain things and they would talk. They were all fascinating to listen to because there was always a story of a broken down car or somebody on the side of the highway, and we were the gas station right off the highway. People would tow their cars in here and they'd have their problems and the mechanics would come in with their tow trucks and they'd tell us the problem. And they could tell, a lot of times, before they even got to the car, they could know what the problem was. Even before they took it to the shop to examine it, they could look at it, listen to it, or maybe just hear the description of the driver before they even examined it themselves. The mechanic was like an engine wizard that would always know really what was happening. And I've always been in awe of that there are people that could be so knowledgeable about a car that they could just know without even looking at it. And these mechanics would come in often. We'd see them come into UDF all the time because they're on the highway. You'd have your broken downs, you'd have your accidents. People would just need the mechanic to come take care of their car, and on the way they'd stop by, they'd bring it in the middle of the night. Like if there was an accident, which was not very common, maybe once, twice a week, you would have someone have an accident where the mechanic is sent out with a tow truck, the paramedics are sent out because of an injury, and a cop is sent out to report the accident on the scene. And all of them, after 3 or 4 hours of being out in the cold, they want to come inside and get warm. And they come to UDF. It happened all the time. You'd have the mechanics come in, they want a quick snack before they head to the garage, a little bit of a warm break from being out in it. You have the paramedics who have just dropped off somebody at the emergency room. They need to get a little bit of food in them before the next call that they go on because they have no idea when they're going to get called somewhere else again. And then you have the cops. The cops come into UDF to get coffee because, well, the cops always came into UDF to get coffee. All the time the cops came in to UDF to get coffee because UDF gave free coffee to cops. It was corporate policy to give complimentary cups of coffee to any police officers in uniform who came into the store. That's just what you did. You saw a uniform, they went to get coffee, you said, "It's on us, sir, have a good day." The highway patrol was right next door, so we saw lots and lots of highway patrol. They were either starting or ending their shift, we never really knew. They were very friendly, they were very appreciative, and they were happy that we could offer them the gift. But they never stuck around long enough to hear the stories because they always had to go somewhere else. And as much as we would push to try to get them to tell us where they were going to be running radar so we could give a warning to all the other people coming to the store, they never would give us a heads up. They didn't stick around to talk. They kept all of it a mystery. The local cops, though, they never left. The local town cops would not leave the store. And they would walk in like they owned the place, and they'd take big thermoses, and they'd fill them all up with their coffee, or even like the cappuccino, the powder stuff that mixes in with the hot water and makes some sort of cappuccino-type drink. They'd fill that whole thing up with a little push button, and then they'd just go sit or stand at the edge of the counter. And they would flirt with the girls that worked there, and you couldn't get rid of them. They would, at the edge of the counter, like they were at an Applebee's bar or something, they would just talk and talk and talk while just chugging away at the free coffee. And the girls couldn't stand it. The girls would try to get away from them. They'd go in the back room, they'd hide, whatever they could do, because they didn't want to have to deal with these cops. And so while you're trying to be nice and polite and ring up an old lady with her gallon of milk, and you're being all, in the moment trying to be a good customer service person, you hear this guy next to you chugging away like, "Hey, Kim, is Lisa on duty tonight?" And you got to deal with that. I didn't want to give them the coffee. Some people in uniform, it kind of upset me to give them coffee because I didn't feel like they deserved it. Giving them coffee was like a sacrifice. You would rather give it to someone else, but the company says you have to do it. The third type of police officer in uniform, they were different. They stood out from all the rest. They were the sheriffs. And let me tell you, 3 types of officers, they really were that memorable in the way that I'm reacting to them, because even to this day, I can still feel the difference in my body that I felt when a sheriff walked in to get coffee, because the sheriffs would pay for their coffee. Even though they're in uniform, even though UDF has a policy, and we would say to them, it's on us, sir, they would pay for their coffee because they're elected officials, and they can't receive anything free like a bribe like that. Even though it's just a cup of coffee, they would still pay for their coffee. So that stuck with me. I remember feeling that weight of their authority and that power, knowing that they put value in this thing because of who they are and what they had authority-wise to give. These type of officers were all drinking the same kind of coffee. All 3 of them drinking the same drink. But the sheriffs felt different because they gave money for theirs. They added value to theirs and power. 3 different gifts, 3 different officers. Gift representing power, mystery, and sacrifice. Jeff and Amy were very interested in having some coffee as well. They were sitting in the parlor eating their 2-day-old ride-off donuts and dried-up roller grill hot dog, and Amy had cut it all nice and neat and even, so they all had their own portion. And they had their 2 kids there to enjoy with them. One of the girls that was being hospitable that worked there had gone over and taken care of what she could to give them what she can to help serve them, even though there's really nothing to serve them and they've not paid for food. She's trying to help them out. She knows they're in a bad spot. All the people working knew they're in a bad spot. And this girl decided she would give them 2 complimentary cups of coffee. Actually, 1 cup of coffee and 1 push-button hot chocolate for the kids. Because the cop, the local guy that comes in with his thermos, that's 2 cups inside that thermos. And he uses his own so we could use those cups. And he hadn't been in yet. So she knew she could give them those cups and it would be really the same thing as this write-off of coffee. She was eager to know their story, just like I'm sure you are. Everyone naturally assumed that there was car trouble, and there was. They had some car trouble. But Amy and Jeff knew just about as much about cars as I do. And from their exhaustion and frustration, it was impossible for them to know exactly what's going on. Like they were just kind of lost in it. Like me, all they really know about their car is that if it's not starting or it's stalling or it's misfiring, it might be something in that piston stroke process that's not quite right. Maybe it's the power from the spark plug. Maybe it's the way the air and the fuel mixes together in that mysterious combustion process. Or maybe it's the fuel itself that's applied to the piston to be sacrificed to the engine for the sake of making the car go. It's either power, mystery, or sacrifice. And I still haven't told you their story yet. Because just like Christmas, it's all about timing. But like the story of Christmas, you already know that Jesus was born, so that's not a surprise. There were some characters in the Christmas story that knew all along what was going to happen, because centuries before it did, they didn't need anything else but to know from what they'd studied what was about to happen. Let's read about them in Matthew 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star and it rose and we've come to worship him." All they needed was a star from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away to know that a baby was born near Jerusalem and that baby born was the true King of the Jews, not Herod, who was just some guy who claimed to be the King of the Jews. They had used all the prophecies and all their study of the stars to determine where to be watching and what it meant for that to happen. And what it meant was that a real king with real power had been born. And not only did he have real power, but he also shared divinity and mystery of God. And as the Savior of the world, he would even, at some point, be there to sacrifice himself as an atonement for his people. That he would be power and mystery and sacrifice. And they knew all of it without even seeing him. Like a good mechanic who can know what exactly from the description, what they've heard, what's going on wrong with your car, and have the tools ready in place, knowing that's definitely a crankshaft position sensor. that to an untrained person may seemingly be a spark plug problem or an air problem or a fuel combustion problem, a wise person with a lot of experience in the field of work can know the problem in advance and can come to the scene with the right items, proving that they knew the whole story beforehand. Matthew 2:9, after they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. When coming to the house, they saw the child, already born, with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These men from the east brought very specific gifts that seem odd to give to a baby, that showed that they knew, just like really good mechanics, exactly who Jesus was in the story before it even played out. Like bringing the right tools to a broken down car. They brought gold, which has a gift of royalty attached to it. You brought gifts of gold to people who had real power and real strength and integrity, because it itself, gold, has real strength and integrity and value. Real kings were worthy of real gold, not inferior metals. They also brought Jesus a gift of frankincense. Frankincense was used in holy priestly worship and was offered and used through burning to release the smoke into the air as a symbol of the mystery of God in the aromatic form. And you can see the smoke and the swirling and realize the visual mystery that is there with God. And they also brought myrrh, which was ceremonially used in embalming of sacrifices during temple worship. It was something you used in death. It showed that these visitors knew the whole story of Jesus before he even took his first steps. 3 gifts representing power, mystery, and sacrifice. Everyone working was eager, as you are, to know how Jeff and Amy got to the gas station and where they were going. But just before they could start sharing with their worker at the table, in walked the local cop for his evening coffee. The girl immediately darted into the back area room to hide and left the family at the table to finish their free meal. So just like everything else in the story of Christmas, it was again all about timing. It wasn't the right time to say the verse where Mary delivered Jesus. And it wasn't the right time for the delivery of Jeff and Amy's story either. That's how kairos is. That just the right time, that Greek word. For the telling of the story, the right time is Christmas Eve to reveal the experience with power and mystery and sacrifice. For your engine, the right time is that perfect balance of synchronicity between the strokes of the piston, the power, the mystery, and the sacrifice. And the right time for us in this world to experience the power of grace, the mystery of God's love, and the sacrifice of our Savior was when we were broken. And I leave you with this verse from Romans. You see, at the kairos, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Amen.